It's my distinct pleasure to introduce to you my friend, Vic Feazell.
Thank you.
I'll turn on my timer so I don't go over time. This is a tough crowd. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Jules. I appreciate it very much. I know everyone here is your friend and they love you. And I'm a stranger here, so maybe they won't heckle me like they did you. I really feel like, though, I'm going to be preaching to the choir. That's an old Baptist phrase, Methodist phrase, preaching to the choir. Because all of you people are probably already doing what my message is and what I'm going to ask you to do at the end of my story, and that is to do the right thing. Have the courage to do the right thing, even when it's not easy. Thank you, Jules and Gila, for showing me and Jonathan around yesterday and today. You have a most beautiful community here. We both love it. We got to go to the beach today and look at the beach, and it was wonderful. But I tell you, I'm sitting down here, and I'm just looking at your posters even. Justice for our planet, thinking globally, acting locally. And then I look over here. War is not the answer. Well, those are some of the things I want to be talking with you about. And so I hope you will indulge me while I preach to the choir. My name is Vic Feazell, and I believe that no matter what religion you are, what race you are, where you come from, whatever, I believe that we all are spirit. And that spirit underpins our entire universe. And therefore, I want to begin my talk by saying that the spirit in me greets and honors the spirits in this room. I already love you from your slogans, from your plaques, from your community activism. And I appreciate all of you. I really do. Now, a little bit about my background and the reason why I wasn't like the other district attorneys in Texas who were happy when they got that call. Hey, Vic, we have some murders in your case, in your county that Henry Lucas has confessed to. Let us bring him up. We'll plead him guilty. You can get your picture taken with us and him, get in the newspaper, and we'll be on our way. Okay? Well, I grew up in the home of a self-educated, poor Baptist preacher. I was a preacher's kid. I was born in Louisiana during the time of segregation. And I never heard my dad say an evil word or a bad word about anybody of another race. All I ever heard from my dad was love and acceptance. Then when I was about 10, 11 years old, we moved to New Mexico. My dad became a home missionary out in New Mexico. We first lived on a Navajo Indian reservation, and then my dad started establishing small churches around New Mexico, and as soon as they'd get going, they'd move us somewhere else. Sometimes those small churches couldn't even afford to pay us every week. We did the best we could to get by. We moved to Leander, Texas by the time I was a sophomore. We had moved to Leander from Farmington, New Mexico, which is a really small town in northwest New Mexico that is surrounded by oil wells. So it had a very wealthy school district. I was so upset with my dad when we moved. I really thought there should be some way he could get us to stay in Farmington, because that was such a rich school district that if you made good grades, as a senior elective, you could get your pilot's license. The school owned its own airplane. Can you believe that? So then we moved to Leander, and they give me the textbooks, and it was stuff I had studied already 2 years before. I was so bored. If I had had to go to school one more year, I'm afraid I would have been a high school dropout. I spent my entire sophomore year sitting in the back of the room reading first The Hobbit and then all 3 volumes of The Lord of the Rings. And that's what I did, but I still made decent grades. And toward the end of the year, I visited with the principal, and I said, Mr. Wood, if you will waive 1 PE credit for me, I can go to summer school, get a math credit, and graduate at the end of my junior year. And he said, okay. And he let me, because he didn't want me to be a waste. He made me promise I'd go to college, and that's a promise I wanted to keep, but at that time I just didn't see how I could do it. My parents couldn't afford to send me to school. I saw on TV an ad that said, the Austin Police Department is taking applications. Come on down and apply. Well, I had already tried to join the military, and my dad wouldn't sign the papers. I was too young. So I went down to the police department. I filled out all the paperwork. They scheduled me to come back for the tests. Me and 50 other people showed up for all the tests. It was 2 days of written tests, some psychological, some physical tests, and then a final interview with the chief and all the captains. By the time it got to the final interview, there were 2 of us left. I was the only one that got hired. And I was barely out of high school, and the other guy was a college graduate. Now, my sergeant later told me why he didn't get hired. It was because when the chief asked him, why do you want to be a policeman? He said, I just always wanted to carry a gun. And the chief goes, I don't think so. I don't think so. So I worked my way through high school. This isn't a joke. I really was a coon skinner. During this winter time, there was a coon season. People would hunt raccoons. I was one of the guys that would skin them, scrape them, nail them to the floor. Dirty work. And in the summers, I hauled hay. So I was really happy when they told me, you got the job, Vic. And then they looked at my application and they said, oh my God, you're only 16 years old. You can't come to work here. But they wanted me because I had done really well in the tests. And I was a scrappy little guy. I was pretty strong. I was a country boy. And they checked with the city attorney's office, and they said, we can get him on insurance on his 17th birthday. So I only had to wait just another week and a half, and I started with the Austin Police Department. I love Austin. I claim Austin as my hometown. Rick Perry once, you might have heard of him. He works for Mr. Trump. He was our governor for way too long. But he described Austin as a blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup. And that's my Austin, and I love Austin. The Austin of Willie Nelson. And Willie Nelson is the reason that Jules and I met. Jules was Willie Nelson's merchandising lawyer. And I had been invited in 1987 personally by Willie Nelson to come and have lunch in his bus, and he introduced me from the stage as the only man in Texas that hated the government as much as he did. That was because that was July the 4th. In late June 20-something, that was the day I was found not guilty. I had been indicted, and I'm going to tell you about that in just a minute, but I had been indicted, and I was looking at 80 years in prison. If I had been found guilty, there would have been men that I sent to prison for murder when I was DA that would have gotten out before me, because these were 80 federal years. And that's why you paying attention to what's going on in your government is so important. Because there really are very powerful people in our government who are not accountable to anyone. Not even to the president, regardless of who the president is. I'm talking about people in the FBI and the CIA who have unlimited budgets, and they do clandestine work, and they report and are accountable to no one. All right, I went to law school after a while. I went to Mary Hardin Baylor College in Belton. I had promised Mr. Wood I would get into college, so I worked for a year at the police department. I saved my money, and a sergeant at the police department said, "Vic, you're a smart boy. If you keep your nose clean, you'll be the youngest chief of police Austin ever had. But who in their right mind wants to be chief of police? Get your butt in college." So I was thinking about that. And then one night on the night shift, and I always worked with Sergeant Jordan, but he wasn't there that night. They had assigned me to him because he was a big guy. He was a scary guy. He could walk through the room and some of the secretaries would start crying. He was that scary. The first thing he said to me was, and I had buzzed my hair to go in and take the test, because when I graduated from high school, I had hair down to here. And so I went and sat in a barber chair, and I said, "I'm going to make your day." He said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, buzz it." And they buzzed it. I went down and took my test. Sergeant Jordan looked at me and said, "Boy, you need a haircut." And so I just had it buzzed. So I started laughing at Sergeant Jordan. And from that day forward, we were friends. And we were friends until the day he died. And I still give him credit for getting me in college. But there was one other policeman I give credit to for getting me in college, but I won't mention his name. He was a captain who was running the floor the night that Sergeant Jordan wasn't there. And they brought in a man who was obviously on LSD or something. The police had brought him in. There was a charge back then called SPO lunacy, suspicion of lunacy. And they had brought this guy in, and he thought he was a rooster. And he was jumping up and down on one foot and crowing like a rooster, and these two other policemen had him by the arms, and this captain with his little, we always thought he was a nerd. He had kind of a belly and little round glasses and usually sat at his desk, and he walked out there into the sally port, saw that guy jumping up and down like a rooster, and jumped on him, slammed him down, started beating his head into the concrete, slammed him with his fist a bunch of times. Then he looked at me, because I had been called out to help bring the guy in. And he looked at the policemen that were holding him, and he said, "You didn't see anything." Well, that bothered me. That bothered me. That's when I decided to leave the police department. That's when I learned what violating the law enforcement brotherhood meant. It means even if law enforcement is doing something wrong, you're not allowed to say anything about it. You're not allowed to turn them in, not to their supervisors, not to the DA, not to anybody. It's called crossing the thin blue line, and you just don't do that. So I quit, and I said, "Dad, I don't know what to do now." And he said, "Well, I was just up for a preacher's meeting at Mary Hardin Baylor," and back then Mary Hardin Baylor was an all-girls school, but they kept 12 guys in a little house on the side of the campus, and we were called campus boys. And this was the middle of the year. This was February. So talk about seeing God's hand in things, God by whatever name you want to call him. I like to just refer to God as the one. One. I just love that, because God is unity. God is everything. And my friend MC Yogi up in Point Reyes, California, helped me understand my fascination with the word one, O-N-E, because he put a period after it. Only now exists. Only now exists. And if you go back to many of our original teachers, no matter what religion you are, that's what many of them taught, is that only now exists, and that there's one. There's one. So anyway, it was the middle of the year. Wasn't any way I could get in. But unfortunately, one of the campus boys had died over the Christmas holidays. And they were looking for someone to take his place. And my dad says, "Hop in the car Monday, we're driving up to see the registrar." The registrar looked at my transcript and she said, "Yeah, we'll let you in. It's going to cost you," and I don't remember, it was less than $100 to register back then for me, because the college picked up the rest of it. So I went to Mary Hardin Baylor, all-girls school, My junior year, they went co-ed. So I got to graduate. I was the first group of men to graduate from Mary Hardin Baylor. And then I went to Baylor Law School. All this time I've been working my way through. They said, if you're going to go to Baylor Law School, apply at least a year in advance. So I did, thinking it would take a year for them to bring me in, but they didn't. They accepted me right away. And I thought, oh my God, I better go. So I went, and I could go 2 semesters, and then I had to drop out for financial reasons. So I took my social work and psychology degree from Mary Hardin Baylor, and I got a job with MHMR as a bottom line social worker. Performed there. Before I knew it, I was director of the drug abuse treatment program. Out of 19 programs in the state, it was ranked last. But I was so fortunate. There was a lot of federal money back then. This was in the 70s. A lot of federal money. They sent me off for great training, business training, how to manage people, all of that. Things that I didn't realize was getting me ready later for the district attorney's office. Within a year, we were the #1 program in the state, and we remained #1 the entire time I was director. And I was able to save half my salary every month so that eventually I was able to go back and finish law school. So praise the Lord for that. Praise the one for that. Back then you could take the bar before you graduated if you had enough hours. So I took the bar before I graduated. And the day I walked the stage, I got my bar scores in the mail. They didn't have the internet back then. So I had to wait for the mail. And there it was, I had passed, and it was on a Saturday. And so Monday morning, I was down at the district court in Waco, which is where Baylor University is, and I stayed in Waco then because after going through law school and doing all that work. So I asked the judge to appoint me on a case. And he said, I don't know, you just got out of law school. I said, yeah, but I went to Baylor. I can try a case. My dad's a Baptist preacher. I know how to do 3 points in a poem. Give me a case. And he did. It was a companion case, a felony and a misdemeanor. We tried the misdemeanor first, a DWI, and I won it with a jury. He was so impressed, he paid me enough money, it made my first month's overhead. I kept winning cases. I loved trying lawsuits. I loved defending criminals, those of society who have fallen short of perfection. And I was trying to defend those who thought they were already perfect, from those who thought they were already perfect. So defending the unperfect from those who think they're perfect. That should be all of our jobs. It should. So I decided about 2 years into criminal defense work, practicing mainly out of the trunk of my car, and I had an appointment with the first assistant DA. I'd never even met him. He only tried the really big cases, but the judge appointed me on a really big felony, and the guy was in jail. And so I went to this first assistant to talk with him. We had an appointment. He kept me waiting for an hour, and when he finally came out, he had alcohol on his breath. He got up in my face and he yelled at me. He said, if you're representing him, you're no better than he is, and started stumbling toward the door. So I looked at him, I yelled at him, I said, sir. And he turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to run against your boss just so I can fire you. And I did. I got out and I shook every hand in the county. I handed out cards to everybody. I became a shameless self-promoter. And I won the job of DA, and I was the youngest DA they had had in over 100 years. And I took that job on with passion. And I tried many cases back to back to back. I didn't stay in the administrator's office. I hired an administrator to do the paperwork and all that stuff. And I stayed in the courtroom and I taught our lawyers how to try cases the way I would try cases. And we were winning. And within a year and a half, we had the top felony conviction in the state of Texas for counties over 100,000. And part of the reason I had that high conviction rate was not just because I was training good lawyers, but because we were screening the cases that came in and I wasn't taking trash. If we thought there was a reasonable doubt on something, say somebody had been accused of some sexual offense and it was he said, she said, we would offer a polygraph. You pass the polygraph and we'll dismiss it. Or if she says it, let her pass the polygraph, or both of you. We used the polygraph a lot because we had a good polygraph operator in our sheriff's office. Another thing I put in, and I tell you this was not popular in 1983, was that I would not prosecute some young person for a small amount of marijuana. Marijuana is still illegal in Texas today. You know, you can go down for a long time still in Texas. Not my clients. I get jury nullification. I busted whole panels 2 or 3 times until they'll dismiss it. So people come to me a lot for small offense marijuana. It's kind of hard if they've got, tons of it or even pounds of it. But you got an ounce or two, you got 4 ounces, you got a vape pen. I haven't lost one yet because I talk to the people. And there are people like you who are starting to open their minds and realize, look outside the box. Just because somebody tells you it's true doesn't mean it's true. Examine the evidence. Lay it out on the table and look at it. So when I got that call from Ranger Bob Prince saying, we have this Henry Lee Lucas, and he's confessed to thousands of cases. We've taken 600 confessions, and by the end of the day, over 250, some accounts say 300 cases were actually closed that were Henry Lee Lucas confessions, where there was no fingerprint, no hair, no witness, no nothing, and DNA comparison had not been invented yet. I had been seeing this guy on TV and was already wondering, how does somebody like that commit that many murders? I had heard him on TV say, well, I just don't leave no evidence. That's my method of operation. I just don't leave no evidence. I'm thinking, that's just not believable. So when he confessed to those, I made him mail me the confessions. And there were inconsistencies in the confessions. As Jules said, we were about to indict one guy for a murder because it had been a string of murders. He was kidnapping prostitutes in East Waco. He had the door handle taken off the inside of his car, but they could open it and get in, but they couldn't get out. And he would take them out in the woods, rape them, stab them with a knife, and then leave them there. One night he got greedy. He kidnapped 2 girls at the same time. He left one tied up in the back seat with something over her eyes, and that came loose so that she could see out. And she started wiggling with the necktie that he had tied her up with and got it loose. Just about the time she sees him coming out of the woods, and as she testified from the stand, he was hunching the air like a dog while he licked the blood off the knife. The handle on his door worked. She rolled over the front seat, crawled out his door, and was off, escaped into the woods. But she could ID him, and we got his car, and the handles were off, and we were prosecuting him for one of those murders, for that murder, and he said, I'll confess to the others if you convict me on this one. But before we got him to trial, Henry Lucas confessed to that one, and then he shut up. He wouldn't do any more. The other one was a young girl named Rita Salazar. She and her boyfriend had been kidnapped just north of Austin. He had been shot and left near Round Rock, just north of Austin, but she had been driven all the way up into McLennan County, whereupon no relation to my principal, a Mrs. Woods, who lives near the highway, heard gunshots at 2 a.m. She and her husband get up and look out the window and see a car driving off down the frontage road there on I-35. They call the police. The police come out with their flashlights and they find the dead body of little teenage Rita Salazar. She and Frank had run out of gas coming back from a movie in Austin, hitchhiking back, and got picked up by a violent criminal predator. Henry Lucas confessed to that. The only problem was that Otis Toole in Florida had also confessed to it. And Otis said, I shot her. And Henry said, I shot her. And they both said, we had Frank and Becky Powell in the car with us. Frank and Becky Powell were two little kids from Jacksonville, Florida, who were related to Otis Toole. Becky Powell became Henry Lucas's traveling companion later. Well, we got their school records, and guess what? They were in school that day. But here's Henry and Otis both saying these little kids, 10 and 12 years old, I think they were. Jonathan knows this better than I do. I've forgotten a lot. Said that they were in the car and helping keep Rita in the car. And I'm looking at this going, this can't be true. This can't be true. And so I just, for a while, I didn't do anything. And then I got another call from Ranger Bob Prince saying, we want to bring him up there. We want him to plead guilty. So when they say on TV, and when all the rest of you watch it, and please do, when they say on TV, well, we believed Henry. Oh, we believed he really did it. He just kind of got confused. No, they didn't. They didn't believe it. They were feeding him this information, and we have videotapes and audio tapes that prove it. Netflix has audio tapes and videotapes that prove it. They were feeding them this information. Now, some people say, well, maybe, now on Netflix, there's this lady named Nan Kuba. She's an apologist for the Texas Rangers. She says, I really think they believed Henry. No, they didn't. Well, I think it was an honest mistake. No, it wasn't. It was a crime. And by then I had figured out there was a crime going on because I was thinking about the families of all these other murder victims that Henry had taken the case on, and they thought they had the real killer. And they didn't. The real killer was out there, and it may have been somebody that they knew. It may be somebody, some of them out there right now who have watched The Confession Killer, and they're worried about, oh my, maybe I'm not going to get away with it now. Because with the podcast that Jonathan and I are doing now, and please listen to my podcast, the Vic Feazell Show. It's one of the best, besides your podcast, it's one of the best ones out there. Listen to it, because we dissect all these confessions and we've got all this material. I would not take that confession. Instead, I called together a grand jury. I showed our judge what we had, and he said, oh, this looks bad. Yeah, I agree with you. I went to Texas Attorney Jim Maddox, and he says, yes, I agree with you. And so we were able to get Henry Lucas away from the Texas Rangers and bring him up to testify in front of our grand jury. And as soon as he got away from them, he started telling the truth. Yeah, they were showing me the pictures. They were letting me read this. They were letting me read that. We had DAs from Little Rock, the DA from Little Rock, Arkansas, who is now a federal judge, come in and tell about when Henry Lucas came to Arkansas and confessed to the murder up there of somebody where he had already gotten a conviction. The only problem was the murderer, the real murderer, was the son of an Arkansas state trooper. And he called in a favor with Bobby Prince, and Bobby Prince talked Henry Lucas into taking that case, and this guy got off. His name was Scotty Scott. You'll see a video of him. All kinds of injustice here. So I take all this we've put together, and I went and visited Colonel Jim Adams. Jules told you a little about Colonel Jim Adams. He was the new head of the state police, had been deputy director of the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover. While he was deputy director of the FBI under Hoover, he was head of the domestic spy program. The program that spies on American citizens, mainly civil rights activists, anti-war activists. Some of you probably have FBI files, because in the Senate hearings, when they called him on the carpet about it, he says, yeah, we've got a lot of files. And when the senator said, how many? He said, oh, probably 8 million. And he looked at the senator like this, meaning, I've got files on you guys. They slapped his wrist. That's all they did, and they let him keep doing his dirty tricks, and then he brought his dirty tricks to Texas. I went and visited with that man, and I said, Colonel Adams, here's what we've got. If you will take this information and clean up your own backyard, I'll shut down our grand jury. I'll shut it down if you'll promise me you'll reopen these cases. And he looked at me and he pointed at me and he said, we are not opening a single Henry Lucas case, but I am going to investigate you. And from that day forward, my life took a spiral down. They came after me with a passion. The FBI came down on me, but they couldn't find anything. because I didn't even have a passport. I had worked my whole life. I was faithful to my wife. I did not use drugs. I did not gamble. I didn't even play golf. I couldn't afford it. All I did for exercise was mow my own yard. The Justice Department has a policy. If we go in and investigate a public official and can't find anything pretty soon, we got to pack it up and go home unless there's a public outcry. Colonel Jim Adams says, well, I can create that public outcry. He contacted an operative with the Republican Party, and this stuff goes across party lines. It happens when the Democrats are in office too, it really does, but somehow it seems to be worse when the Republicans are there. But he contacted this guy named Tom Pauken, who was just like a trickster for the Republican Party, and he was on their payroll. And Tom Pauken had connections with Channel 8 in Dallas, Channel 8 News, Charles Duncan, investigative reporter. And before I knew it, while my grand jury was still going on, Charles Duncan was going around to my barbershop, to restaurants where I ate, saying, do you know Vic Feazell is under federal investigation? Do you know this and that? Do you know this and that? And in the meantime, Colonel Adams had put one of his right-hand men on me, a guy named Ron Boyder. And Ron Boyder was going through files looking for any case that had ever been dismissed or any case that somebody had gone a little soft on it. Mostly drunk driving cases and a few drug possession cases. Now, keep in mind, I was not the only person in the DA's office. I had 13 assistants. I didn't try the DWI cases. I didn't have anything to do with them. But they were going around saying, he's taking bribes to dismiss DWIs. I started getting these phone calls. Before I knew it, the FBI was back in town, and they're going around because then there was the public outcry. And before I knew it, the IRS was in town, and they were investigating and auditing every criminal defense lawyer in town. Every one. They just about shut down the whole criminal justice system of McLennan County. And they found 4 lawyers with tax problems, and they promised them immunity. If they would testify, they gave me part of the money to go easy on their cases. They wrapped the black shroud of immunity around them and called it the American flag and indicted me. Arrested me. They followed my wife and my little boy to where they were going to have breakfast in a restaurant, waited for their food to be put on the table, and then took them out without letting them pay. My little boy was 4 years old. That was a childhood imprint on him that he never got over. They wouldn't let him sit up front with his mom. They made him sit in the back with somebody wearing a gun. And after that, they illegally tapped my phones, and when my little Sheltie dog would bark at them, they poisoned my dog. We took my dog to the vet immediately after I found him in the backyard with his tongue hanging out of his mouth, and our vet said, he's been poisoned. This is the same vet who had given my son a little syringe that he had used to give Spanky a shot with. And my son took that, no needle on it, just the plastic, put it in his toy doctor kit and says, I'm going to be a veterinarian someday. Well, when the FBI stormed into my house, 14 of them, searching my home while another 14 arrested me at the courthouse and searched my office at the courthouse, my little boy was sitting on that couch when my wife said, can we turn on the TV? And they turn on the TV, and my little boy sees Daddy being led away with handcuffs. We thought we had kept this away from him, but only a month before, he had said to me, I was driving him to school, and his lips all down. I said, what's wrong, buddy? He says, I don't want you to go to jail, Daddy. It was sad. It affected my wife. She had PTSD after this. It affected me. It affected our little boy, but I had to keep fighting. My back was against the wall. I had no choice. And when they arrested me, they made the mistake of cuffing me in the front. And some of you might see on the table out there the handcuffs breaking and the thumbs up, because as I walked past the cameras, instead of the usual perp walk, you know, like that, no, I did this. And I said, you know what's going on here, and I'll still be proven right. And I was talking about Rita Salazar, because if I had let him plead to Rita Salazar, see, the murder of the prostitutes, he was already in prison for life for that one. But if I had let him plead to Rita Salazar, that would have been a closed case. Not a cold case that somebody might work on later, but a closed case. No one would have ever looked at it. And when I said, you know what's going on here, I'll still be proven right. Well, I was found not guilty in the criminal trial because it was obvious to the jury the government was trying to frame me, because assistant after assistant of mine got on the stand and said, Vic didn't even know this case was in the office. I dismissed this case, and here's why. And they had good reasons for it. So the jury took one vote, found me not guilty, held a press conference, said it was obvious the government was trying to frame this young man. Then I went back. I had another murder case I had to try because I had promised the lady I'd do it. Her 2 little sons had been burned up in the shed in the backyard by their evil stepfather. And I tried that case, convicted them, and I resigned. I resigned from the DA's office so I could sue Channel 8. Channel 8, who had come to Waco and published 11 defamatory episodes about me over a 12-week period, over trying to just get me out of office. And I got to say, I love the people of Waco because they re-elected me under indictment. I was under federal indictment. They elected me 6 weeks after I was arrested. 1 week before the election, the newspaper headline came out, "Drug paraphernalia found in DA's home." It was my little boy's syringe. My wife remembers Greg Rampton, FBI agent Rampton, coming out of his room going, drug paraphernalia, tag this, drug paraphernalia. They even tagged my wife snail bait because she grew flowers and we had trouble with snails. They tagged that and claimed it might be cocaine. They went through her underwear drawer. They unwrapped everything in our freezer. It was so much intimidation, it was unreal. But it was the second prong of their tactic. Disinformation, Charles Duncan and Channel 8. Intimidation, what they were doing to us there, and then isolation. They started bringing our friends to grand juries, and anyone we associated with got visited by the FBI, so no one wanted anything to do with us. So I was finally found not guilty. Then I sued Channel 8. Thank God for my lawyer, Gary Richardson. He had been a U.S. attorney in eastern Oklahoma and had prosecuted 50 office holders. See what I'm doing here? He had prosecuted 50 office holders, and he said, I have never seen one arrested. We would always call their lawyer or call them and tell them to come and turn themselves in. This is obviously retaliation. They're trying to get even with him over Lucas. So then he and I did the Below case. We sued Channel 8. We proved that every single solitary sentence they said was an absolute lie. And not only was it a lie, that it was done with malice, because I had to prove malice. So New York Times versus Sullivan. I had to prove malice. I was a public official. And we proved malice, and we got the largest libel verdict in the history of the United States. Yeah. It made the Guinness Book. Well, I'm in the 1992 Guinness Book, the largest libel verdict in history. Vic Feazell versus Below. Now, Colonel Jim Adams said, well, we weren't able to put him in jail, but we don't have to let him keep that money. After I had gone around giving money away to everybody that needed it, I was buying cars for people like I was Elvis. They changed the tax code, made it retroactive 5 years just to scoop me up in it. I appealed to the U.S. tax court where Adams had no friends. I won 11-1. All 12 judges wrote on it. Then the government appealed to the Fifth Circuit, where the little guy never wins. I lost there, 2-1. One of the judges disagreed. I then appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they were too busy that year to take it up. The IRS took everything away from me that I owned. I had to sell my home. I had to sell all my investments. I had quit practicing law, and all I had done is study this new thing called the information highway. It was coming. It's the internet, see? And I invested in all the right stuff. I was an early investor in Dell. But I had to sell it all. But you know what? We got a phone call the other day from Rita Salazar's sister. She was mad at me. She was not on the phone call, but back when I let Henry, when I wouldn't let Henry plead guilty, she was so mad, so mad. But we've got a phone call the other day from her, and she was apologizing. And she was saying, "I'm so happy you did what you did, Vic. Otherwise, they'd have never caught who murdered my sister." 30 years later, her DNA matched somebody in CODIS. And they went and visited him. And they talked to him a little while, and he confessed not only to killing Rita, but to killing Frank. And he had all the details right. It was never shown any pictures. It was never shown any police reports. And he's in prison now for the murder of Rita Salazar. When I said, "You know what's going on here, and I'll still be proven right." Now, Martin Luther King has a phrase that I just love. He said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Jonathan knows that quote. It's long, but it bends towards justice. Be part of the group that helps that arc bend towards justice. Stand up and do what's right. Do what Gandhi said to do. Be the change. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Just like Gandhi. Yeah. I'm Vic Feazell, and the Spirit in me greets and honors the Spirit in you. Please listen to my podcast, The Vic Feazell Show, and watch Netflix, The Confession Killer, and tell them they need to do a second season because they left so much out. They even left out the part about the IRS taking my money away. I had to get off of Facebook because I've had 2,000 requests, some demands for money, even a couple extortion attempts. So spread the word. Vic goes to work every day. He goes to the grocery store. You know, he doesn't have that money anymore. Spread the word. And please do what's right, not what's easy.